everyone, and welcome to session 4 of our Teacher Professional Development series focused on K-3 writing. My name is Sarah Stolman, and I am the K-3 Literacy Professional Development Specialist here at the Louisiana Department of Education. I'm excited to be here with you guys continuing this series. We know that our teachers have been very excited and our leaders have been very excited about learning more about writing and how it aligns with the science of reading. So we're just incredibly excited to offer this series to you guys and to really deepen your understanding of what does writing look like at K-3. And today with me is our K-3 leader, PD, just our leader specialist. I'm gonna let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katasha Edwards. I am the literacy leader, PD specialist here in the literacy division at the department. And as Sarah said, we're very excited to be with you guys for session 4. It's really gone by so fast, but we are just really excited about sharing this information. We had so many questions from teachers and leaders about alignment of practices for writing to the science of reading. So we hope that this series has informed you and help you as you travel on your journey with the science of reading and really just thinking about writing implementation practices.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to jump right in today and we have introduced ourselves, Katasha Edwards and Sarah Stolman. If we can assist you in any way, please never hesitate to reach out to either one of us. And we correspond daily. So, you're never going to go wrong emailing either one of us. We'll make sure that you get the information you need. Today's objective is that by the end of this session, the participants are going to be able to explain how you will support students' writing for a variety of purposes. So we're really going to shift the focus to writing for a particular purpose. And we're going to talk about how that aligns directly with the work that you're doing with the science of reading. So this is really going to support everything we've talked about in the first 3 sessions of this, but also in our science of reading series that came out in this past summer. So I definitely want to refer you to make sure that you watch that series and watch the first 3 sessions of this series if you haven't done so, because it's all part of a larger story here. All of the work that we're doing is very connected, and really this work is just about showing you how all that we're doing with our students aligns. We're teaching them to read, to make sense of what they read, and then to be able to communicate about what they read. And writing is just one way that students are able to communicate their ideas and their thoughts. Now, as we've mentioned in the first several sessions of this series, writing is a very complex process. So when we think about our students at K-3, who are really just learning the code, who are learning to apply their knowledge of the code to spell words and to write words, there is a lot that we're expecting them to do. They have to manage many factors simultaneously. They're thinking about the words that they want to write. How do they spell those words? How do they put those words together so that they make sense in sentences? They're connecting it to background information and content knowledge that they've learned. And this is a really complex task that we're asking to do. For students who aren't fluid writers, who aren't able to kind of write words with automaticity, it's especially hard for them. And so writing doesn't necessarily just start with putting words on paper, right? Our writing instruction starts by questioning our students, getting our students to communicate ideas. And then as their ability to write and encode words more fluently improves, then they're going to be able to take all of that knowledge that they've gained through those activities and put it down on paper. Now, for students who are not yet at a point of encoding with sufficient automaticity, or those with those limited oral language skills, and we know those students who come into our kindergarten and first grade and sometimes second grade classes, work with writing really does need to begin orally and should focus on responding to text, either by sharing ideas or responding to questions. And today, as we talk about writing for a particular purpose, we're going to talk about how that can be done in the context of questioning too, right? What students communicate in response to questions that you ask them should also reflect this purpose that they have, or this writer's purpose. If I ask you to share facts, at that point, I don't want you to share your opinion. If I ask you to share your opinion, you can bolster it with facts, but at the same time, it's totally okay for you just to share your opinion with me. And so it's important for students to understand this idea of purpose and audience. And we're going to talk through this today because I want you to see how this works in that K-3 classroom. Now, in grades K-3, the focus of writing instruction, as we've kind of emphasized through this series, should be on two key areas: building their capacity to encode with automaticity. So you're going to spend some of your time, especially that time when you're working on those foundational skills, building their ability to apply their knowledge of the code, put it down in print. But at the same time, we want to build that capacity to develop complex thoughts, right? Now, for students who are just learning to encode, they're not going to be able to communicate complex thoughts in their writing. It's not until their ability to encode with more automaticity or encode with automaticity grows that they are going to be able to put those thoughts in writing. So we do have to build these separately, but as they become more proficient in both areas, just like with the reading rope, they will merge together and they will be able to communicate their ideas in writing and their deep thinking ideas in writing. Again, just referencing this reading rope, but the idea of writing fits right into this, right? On the one hand, we're building their ability to comprehend, but also communicate what they comprehend, while at the same time, we're building their capacity to recognize words and compose words or encode words in their writing. And over time, as these things braid together, they're able to do both simultaneously. But it's okay for them to do it separately at first. So please, please, please keep that in mind. If that is the one thing you take away from this series, it's very important to understand that, because otherwise you're going to lead to frustrating activities for your students and unproductive activities for your students. Now, today we're going to talk a little bit about writing with purpose. So as our students begin writing, so, in kindergarten, they show up in our classroom, it's important for them to understand that writing has many different purposes, right? Sometimes we're just writing a text on our phone and that's very informal and we might not use the same rules of grammar or punctuation or anything like that. But academically, most of the time when we're writing to share information, to share our opinions, to explain ideas or processes, and sometimes even to entertain. And these different purposes are reflected in the Louisiana Student Standards for Writing. So, when we think about those standards that fall under text types and purposes, we're thinking about when we ask our students to write opinion pieces, to write these informative and explanatory texts, and then to write narratives. Now, where we're going to shift today is I really want you to think about purpose as a choice that you're asking your students to make when you call upon them to write something. So, I know oftentimes, sometimes it might be like, okay, this 9 weeks, we're going to be working on opinion writing, or this 9 weeks, we're going to be working on informative writing. But I'm going to ask you to really reconsider that process. And I want you to think about how, in the context of the curriculum that you're teaching, particularly that knowledge building curriculum that you're teaching, how are you developing your students' ability to understand when it's appropriate to write an opinion piece, when it's appropriate to write an informative piece, and when it's appropriate to write a narrative piece? And you're going to do all of these things simultaneously, right? Our students need to be able to look at the task at hand, understand what's being asked of them, and decide which of these types of writing is best suited to that task, right? So practicing these different genres in isolation over time isn't going to lead to the same level of productive understanding that really asking your students to think, okay, today I want you to share this, and then think about what I'm asking them to do and which of these would be most appropriate for that particular question. That's a much more powerful way for them to learn how to write. What's more, that's deeply embedded in the work that you're doing in your knowledge building curriculum. So as you are learning about a particular topic, maybe you're learning about the human body, or maybe you're learning about mammals, right? One day, you may ask students to share their opinion about the topic that you have learned about. But then the next day, you might ask them another question to share information about, the different systems in the body. And then they are going to provide information related to that, not their opinion, but facts that they've gathered from the text. But your job as a teacher is to really help them see how, depending on what is being asked of them, they make decisions about the type of writing that they will produce, right? So you have to embed each of these types of writing into your curriculum all the time, right? Not separately. You don't spend 9 weeks just working on one type, 9 weeks working on another type, and then 9 weeks working on the next type, just for the sake of learning these different types of writing, right? We teach students to understand that we think about what is the purpose of our writing, and we make decisions based on that. Now, being able to identify the purpose for a particular type of writing is an important part of a student's writing development. And this can easily start in that pre-writing phase. So for our kindergartners, and we're in that first 9 weeks of school, or we're in those first few weeks of school, you're still building their capacity to write and to think about purpose through the work that you're doing with questioning. Now, at the earliest level, students begin to understand when it's appropriate to communicate their opinions, when they should share information or explain and reference the texts that they've read or reference background knowledge that they have, and when it's appropriate to be creative, right? This work can begin in the context of those questions and answers about texts that you're reading. So as you're reading aloud stories, or as you get into second grade and your students are maybe reading a little more independently, you're going to start asking your students questions. And if I ask you to share facts, or if I'm the teacher and I'm asking a student to share facts and they're telling me their opinion, I really have to think about that as that is not a student who is making the best decision about the purpose, right? So I'm going to redirect that student and help that student understand that what I'm asking them to do is to share facts, not opinions. That is going to support their writing as they become more proficient writers. So once they understand that what I'm asking, if they think deeply about what I'm asking them to do, and they respond to that appropriately, that's going to support their ability to respond to prompts that we have, or questions that we have that we expect them to do in writing. But at the earliest, at the pre-writing stage, this work starts with the questioning and answering orally that's embedded in your curriculum. That work is writing work, and it's okay to think about it in that way. Now, as students develop an understanding of the purpose of their writing, the focus can then turn to identifying that key content to include, right? So if I ask a student to share which is their favorite animal habitat, right? It's perfectly okay for them to say the Arctic tundra is my favorite animal habitat. Now I might guide them to include reasons why that are grounded in the text that I've read to them. But for that particular question, it's perfectly fine for them to respond with opinion writing. Now, if I'm in this unit on habitats, one day I may ask them to do that as part of an exit ticket, right? Or as part of the lesson that I've developed. But then in the next day, I might say, okay, yesterday you shared that your favorite, or the habitat that you would want to live in, is the Arctic tundra, or whatever, the desert, say, for some students may choose that. Then the next day I may ask them to share facts about their favorite habitat, right? Or tell me what they know about their favorite habitat. Well, that's no longer opinion writing, and I want our students to understand that. We want our students to understand that based on that question, the focus then turns to sharing information that's grounded or referenced in the text, or comes from background knowledge that they may have. But we want them to understand how their background knowledge may be different from the knowledge that they gain from the text that they read. And we're going to give them ways to communicate that. Now, that's a major mountain to climb instructionally at these earliest levels, really to get them to understand how to respond appropriately to these questions. Now, as their ability to communicate these ideas with appropriate purpose grows, that's when we're going to move into develop more nuanced understandings of the components of the different genres of writing, right? And as an instructional coach, as an assistant principal, and in this new role that I'm in now, I think that's one of the things that I notice most frequently about writing instruction that I would ask you guys to really reflect on and shift, right? Because I think for most of us, a lot of times what we'll do is we start to think about the structure of writing, right? Oh, we got to have an intro sentence, and we have to have a conclusion sentence, and we have to have all of these things embedded. And while it is important for students to understand how to compose an essay, right? What's more important is making sure they understand the purpose and that they're incorporating relevant content. Only then do we start really pushing them to develop a more nuanced understanding about how you would communicate that, right? Through an intro, through the paragraph structure that we talked about in previous sessions and stuff like that. So, you're really thinking about having your students understand the purpose, having students communicate based on their understanding of that purpose, and then developing more nuanced understandings of what these different genres look like. But we don't teach genres for the sake of teaching genres. And I think that's a big, maybe mindset shift for a lot of us, right? We're not just teaching opinion writing for the sake of teaching opinion writing. We're embedding our writing in the context of the knowledge building curriculum that we're doing. And then we're pushing students to make choices about what is the purpose of our writing, and then using genres as a tool to effectively respond to the prompts or the questions that we're asking them. So it's really important to think about that. Now, I've said this throughout this entire series, and Ms. Edwards has referenced this as well throughout the entire series, but this work is embedded in the context of the knowledge building curriculum that we're teaching. Writing is not separate from reading. We don't need a separate writing block, right? Writing is incorporated and embedded into the curriculum that you're teaching. Now, that's not to say if over time your students are struggling with different aspects of writing, you couldn't pull a small group, or maybe do a lesson if it's a whole class problem, do a lesson to truly support their understanding of writing. That's totally okay, right? But as a general rule, we don't need this daily extra writing time if we're meaningfully incorporating this writing work into the context of the curriculum that we're teaching. And that's where you're going to have the most impact, right? We don't want our students to learn all about habitats or the human body in reading, and then we shift over, and today's focus is on opinion writing. And I'm going to ask you to share what's your favorite flavor of ice cream, right? That's not productive writing, and that's not supporting them in developing their ability to communicate complex ideas in writing. So really reflect on that and think about that. And as you analyze the curriculum that you're teaching, you'll start to see how this is embedded in that. And it might help you make sense of the choices that curriculum writers have made, and look for those opportunities to see where writing is embedded there, because it is there. And if you have to add something, a little exit pass or something like that to get additional information, that's okay too. But it's all embedded in the context of that curriculum. Now, as they become more proficient in identifying the purpose, responding, given the right circumstances, and then developing a more nuanced approach to writing, that's where I'm going to push them to start thinking about audience, right? And you can start this at a very basic level at the earliest levels. But, in kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, we're going to push them to kind of communicate clear and effective sentences. But as they become more proficient writers, we do want them to understand that you write differently depending on the audience that you're writing to. So they have to develop a sense for writing for a particular audience. So depending on the audience that you're writing for, you're going to use different language or sentence structures, different vocabulary. You know, if you're writing and explaining something about habitats, you can't assume that everybody knows what a tundra is, right? If you're writing to a wide audience. Now, if you're writing an essay that you're going to share with a bunch of scientists who focus on habitat, then you probably don't have to explain the vocabulary as much. And then there are levels of formality, you know, how we write in a text to our mom is very different than how we might write, you know, present a formal writing. And so we'll work to develop those things. And so that's where we will push our students to think about, depending on my audience, do I have to offer more explanation for what these words mean? What is the level of complexity that I can use in terms of developing my sentences, right? And that really only comes over time and as students become more proficient writers. But it is important for our students to understand that we write for different purposes, but we also write for different audiences. And as I mentioned, this probably, you know, you can kind of touch on some of these ideas at the earliest grade levels, but it's not something that we're really going to push with our students and differentiate with our students until, you know, second, third grade, really when they're becoming much more proficient encoders and the mental work that they're doing isn't really on the spelling. You know, that's kind of coming out automatically with them. Now, one of the questions, you know, one of the things that we'll often hear or questions or feedback that we get is really this disconnect between, you know, this kind of lower elementary and upper elementary. And I think that as we kind of rethink the way that we teach our writing and we rethink it in the ways that we've talked about as aligned to the science of reading, we're going to see that our students do enter third grade much more prepared for the work that we expect there as they enter upper elementary school. But one of the things that I know is that sometimes our K-2 teachers really don't have a sense for what is expected of our third grade students and above. So what I did here is I went to one of our LEAP 2025 practice assessments and I pulled one of the writing prompts from that assessment. And I thought I would read through it and then give you guys a little time to think about and reflect on, you know, what we've talked about and how it relates to this. So this comes from a third grade LEAP 2025 assessment. And this is what it says. It says, your friend thinks it is impossible for people and animals to live in the Arctic. Write a letter to your friend explaining it is possible to live in the Arctic. Include information about how people and animals are able to survive in the cold. Use ideas and facts from both articles in your letter, right? Now, what is the purpose for this writing? And what do your students need to understand in order to successfully respond to this prompt? So if you're watching this, or if you're in a group watching this, this would be a good time to pause and kind of talk through this at your tables or, you know, in the group that you're with. So I'm going to let you guys pause and then we'll talk through it together. Pause. Okay. So hopefully you've had some time to talk about this or reflect on it. But when we think about what is the purpose, are we asking our friend to share their opinion? Not really. We're asking them to share facts, or we're asking you to share facts, our students to share facts. We want them to explain that it is possible to live in the Arctic, okay? So we're telling them what their statement is, and then we're asking them to share those facts. So this isn't a time when, it's my personal opinion that you can live in the Arctic. It might not be pleasant, but you know, you're referencing the article that was provided, and you're bringing facts from that to communicate an idea, right? Now, we're also asking you to write to your friend, and presumably your friend is not a scientist of the Arctic, you know, or an expert in all things Arctic. You know, he thinks it's possible, or he thinks it's impossible for animals and people to live in the Arctic, okay? So what we're gonna do is the audience here might be a little less formal, right? But we might have to explain a little more to our friend. Okay, so you see this mental process that we're asking them to go through, to kind of think about what is that purpose, think about who we're writing to, and then communicate facts based on that. So that's very different than, okay, today we're going to write a narrative piece on this, right? And I want you to think about, as a kindergarten teacher, as a first grade teacher, how the work that you're doing in knowledge building and in the work that you're doing in asking and having your students respond to questions supports their ability to ultimately get to this, right? Because as you push them to respond to questions and push them to respond referencing the text, you're building their capacity to respond to a question like this when they get to third grade. And hopefully their encoding skills are more automatic. Now I did another one. And so this story tells about Derek's first camping trip. So we're saying, write Derek's journal entry about this camping trip. Include information about how the characters responded to the events in the story as you write the journal entry. So these students have just read an article about a little boy named Derek who went on a camping trip. They shared a lot of information about it, and we're asking them to share information from the text. And they're writing as a journal entry, right? So here it might be okay to be a little bit creative, but we're still incorporating elements from the text that we read. So we'll stop right here and I'll let you talk through what is the purpose for this writing and what do your students need to understand in order to successfully respond to this prompt. I'll pause. Okay, so hopefully you had some time to reflect on that and to think about that prompt and think about how the work that we're doing at the earliest levels really builds them to achieve or to be able to successfully respond to that in writing. Now, our youngest students can prepare for this work by thinking deeply about the texts that are read to them. And as they grow in their reading fluency, the texts that they read, and then communicating their ideas both orally and writing, right? Before they can read fluently, the work begins with the questions and the oral responses that you're asking them, right? From texts read aloud. Now, as they build their reading fluency, then we can start asking them to respond to questions based on texts that they read. But we don't rush this process. We build this process as a natural progression, but we understand what's appropriate given what they can do at that time. Because if we're strategic and intentional about that, their writing will just be phenomenal by the time they get to second and third grade. Now, providing our students with opportunities to communicate their thinking and pushing them to communicate appropriately, citing evidence from texts that are read to them, and that work is setting them up to communicate their thoughts in writing, right? So you have to think about these questions as really the foundation for writing. And you can see that that ensures that everything remains embedded in the text. Writing is not separate, writing is a part of what we're doing. And so it's all interrelated, and you don't need that separate writing time every day if the work that you're doing is intentional in your reading and you're giving them opportunities to communicate and building their opportunities to communicate in writing. Now, I am going to turn it over to Ms. Edwards, who is going to share what leaders can do to support this work, and that is very, very important. So, Ms. Edwards, if you want to share that.
Sure, thanks, Sarah. I really think that as we progress through this series, I like each session even more. I think today's session was very powerful and very important when thinking about making sure that our students have opportunities to write for a variety of purposes throughout their learning. So as leaders, when reviewing lesson plans, look for opportunities for students to write for a variety of purposes within a unit of study. I know as a former leader, we look at those lessons plans and we check, but just take a few minutes to make sure that when teachers talk about the writing that students are doing, that they're not just focused on one genre of writing for the whole 9 weeks or for the whole unit of study, but there are opportunities for students to write for a variety of purposes throughout that unit of study. And also today, I think was a prime example, use vertical alignment to support writing conversations across grade bands and content areas. Just like we took opportunities today to look at those two LEAP writing prompts, that would be a great way to vertically align and allow you to do that within your PLCs or with across your schools to, let those vertical conversations really lead and see how we can push those expectations for students to respond to writing for a variety of purposes, beginning as early as pre-K all the way to the testing grades, and not that we wait to have those conversations in third grade. Another thing that we can do as leaders is to use backwards design to allow for the identification and planning of writing for a variety of purposes. Now, we talked about, the high quality curriculum, selected by your school system. It has writing embedded, but, as we plan those backwards design units of study, it really just will give an opportunity for teachers to really dig in and to see those different types of writing and be able to identify that prior to beginning a unit of study. The next thing is to make sure that we provide professional development opportunities on writing for all teachers. I think I've said this in all of our sessions. We always, for as long as I've been a teacher and a leader, thought of all teachers as a reading teacher, but it's equally important for us to think of all teachers as writing teachers. And in order for us to do this successfully across schools and school systems, we have to provide professional development for all of our teachers on writing. Sarah and I had an opportunity to sit through the Writing Revolution PD a couple of weeks ago, and we're just finishing up our lessons. We have a few more sessions to finish with that. So just some kind of uniform writing professional development so that you can align practices across your school would be very powerful, because we don't want different messages from different grade levels and different teachers. And lastly, just cultivate a culture of writing that views writing as an avenue to support and improve student reading across all content areas. Because, we looked at today some of those reading prompts, but we know that those prompts exist in math, they exist in science, and they exist in social studies. So we just want to make sure that we're creating a culture of writing across our schools and our school systems that embrace it as an opportunity for us to really understand our students' ability to read and comprehend what they're doing. So just really thank you for joining today. I'll let Sarah finish us out and reach out to us if you have any questions or any opportunities that you would like us to support with.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, here is our contact information. You can contact either katasha.edwards@la.gov or sarah.stolman@la.gov. This is important work. Writing is such an important and meaningful skill. And, it's, as students move into college and their careers, being effective writers really makes the difference between being successful or not. This is not simply just kind of passive work that, this is important. Being able to communicate your thoughts and ideas clearly and effectively is important. And at the K-2 level, that is where we start this important work. The K-3 level, that is where we start this important work. So if we can support you in any way with this, please do not hesitate to reach out. We're happy to do so. And we look forward to our next session. In our next session, we will be sharing a Google form asking you guys for feedback or suggestions on what sessions you would like us to produce related to writing. And we have some more exciting things coming up. We'll be releasing that soon, but in the meantime, have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you next week. Bye.